Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game. And you might be thinking to yourself, hold on, isn't this the bit that Kevin's supposed to do? Kevin's up in Edinburgh, being an artiste, so it's down to me. So you've got the runt of the litter as far as the introduction is concerned. Yes, it's me, Kieran Maguire from the University of Liverpool, and today we've got a chat with Tom Lawrence, the Chief Executive of Southend United Football Club, and in addition to that, Liam Ager, the co-editor of the Southend Fanzine All at Sea and a member of the Shrimpers Trust Board. I think it's fair to say that Southend has been a regular feature of The Price of Football, and following this interview, we genuinely hope that you won't be hearing about Southend United for a long, long time. Tom, Liam, it's the end of July. It's not the football season, but it is the football season. And we all seem to be smiling. So thanks very much for coming onto the podcast. Just to give the listeners a bit of background, how have we ended up today having this conversation about Southend United? What's your horrible word? What's your journey to where we've got to today?
Shall I kick off, Liam?
Go for it.
So I started my career as a boat builder many years ago, decided that was a bit too much like hard work. So I went off to Southampton Institute, which is now Southend University, got my degree, qualified as a lawyer in 2006, worked in private practice for several years in the regions, then 7 or 8 years in London, and during that period I acted for Gillingham Football Club and got to know Paul Scully well. We had lots of cases together, one big one which resulted in a substantial payout for Gillingham, and off the back of that Paul asked me to come and be his in-house lawyer. I said, no, I don't fancy that, Paul. He said, well, why don't you come and be my chief exec? And I was like, well, that sounds pretty cool. So that's what happened. I joined Paul and I was there for 2.5 years at Gillingham, and I'm very proud of the journey there. We moved from a loss-making position to a profit-making position, albeit it was marginal, but it was still a move in the right direction. I then left Gillingham to set up my own law firm, and going through that process is quite elongated. So I thought, well, I'll give Ron a call and see if he's got any legal work for me. And
why do you have a clue that he was going to have some?
Well, I thought I've got 90 days to kill, so it was interesting actually. Whilst I was at Gillingham, at the same time, I got a message off of Stan Collymore on LinkedIn, and I thought, that's one of my mates taking the mickey. So Stan said, it'll be great to connect so-and-so, so-and-so. And I was like, okay, well, why don't we do a Zoom call? Thinking I'll call that out straight away. And there he appeared on the screen. I was like, oh my God, it's Stan Collymore. That's pretty cool. And we got on very well. And he sort of, after my initial contact with Ron, he sort of opened the door, and I met Ron at his place in Benfleet. And then that 90 days came and went, and I did a full commercial audit. I did my situation, task, action, result analysis, put together a business plan, and then Ron said, okay, well, that's pretty good. Why don't you stay on full time, which is what I agreed to do. And that's how I ended up at Southend.
Amazing. It doesn't sound like a 9 to 5 either.
No, no, it's not. It's been pretty full on, and I mean, since I joined, I mean, every stone you pick up and look under, it's crikey, what's going on here? And we had to do quite a significant restructure. We've had to make some difficult decisions, particularly around the academy, and originally slimming that down and then disbanding it and moving the under-19s program across to our community. It's lots of difficult decisions, but it was important that the ship kept sailing, and that's what we've managed to achieve to get to this point.
Amazing, amazing. And how about you, Lim? You are a lifetime shrimper.
My my sort of backstory is way less interesting than that. I work in a factory in Sussex. It's like I don't have quite such a varied route in. No, much to my chagrin, I am not a lifetime shrimper. I was actually a Manchester United fan until the Carling Cup game. Southend was my second team. Southend was the team that my dad took me to see when I was younger in the early 90s. But they were always my second team until the balls were drawn and it was Man United against Southend. And then I remember thinking, I don't want Man United to win that game. I want Southend to win that game. And it was just like a light bulb moment for me. And I never looked back. I was asked to join the editorial team of the Fanzine in, I think, like 2017, something like that. Jamie Forsyth was doing Jamie Forsyth at the time. James Falkingham were doing a lot of it on their own, and they were looking for a bit of help. I'd written a few articles for them, a lot of stuff about finance, a lot of stuff about sort of when the accounts were at that point published on time, sort of decoding it a lot for the writers, making sure that it was sort of like easily accessible information, like how much money have we made, how much money have we lost, how much debt is there, how much debt is accruing, what is the sort of end result of that debt, where's the money coming from, all of those sorts of things. And then that ended up sort of manifesting itself as in January 2023, which feels like a lifetime ago. The High Court held a hearing as part of a winding up proceedings with HMRC, and I was just really, really confident that the local newspaper, the Southend Echo, wouldn't send anybody to cover the fact that, you know, 117-year-old football club could have been killed that afternoon. And I was right, and so we were the ones able to break the story that the judge's decision was a final adjournment for the 1st of March, and the whole spotlight being shone on Southend United really kicked off from there. And I think that's sort of what's led us to where we are now, because there's just been a lot of Ron Martin's chickens have come home to roost in the last 18 months or so. I think that's fair to say, diplomatically.
I get that. I mean, from your point of view, Tom, did you anticipate the level of firefighting? Yeah, what for you? Has there ever been a moment in all of this where you thought it ain't going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. It looked impossible at times, Kieran, and when it wasn't looking impossible, it was looking improbable. I mean, I think, as I said, when I came in and did the commercial audit, the idea was to try and try and reduce the losses and do things more efficiently and bring a sprinkling of corporate, was what I used to say. The people used to roll their eyes. But I wanted to try and create a supportive culture. And I think we've achieved that. I mean, the hiring of Kevin, Darren, and Mark was a turning point for me. And we interviewed, Ron, Gary, and Stan interviewed the guys, and I can remember we had lots of names in the industry who came along, and Kevin May came in, who I know. He lives in Brentwood where I live, and of course he was a legend, and I'm been a Southend fan since I was knee high. But it was Stan jumping up once Kevin left the room and said, "I want to play for Kevin Mayer." I was like, "Yeah, I want to play for Kevin Mayer too," and that was it. And what the guys have done and the culture that they have created on their side of the business has been exceptional, because one of the key planks of the business plan was we wanted to try and create an environment for success so we could become high performing. So we were going to do things better. We were going to get better food in, better gym equipment. We're going to do everything better. But you get part way in. Well, the business plan is drafted and we started to implement it. Then all of a sudden the wheels start to fall off, and we have the problems Liam's just talked about with HMRC. We had multiple hearings with the electricity company wanted to turn the lights off because we were delinquent. Nice people, by the way, but they've got their job to do. We were strategically parking vans over water mains to stop the water being turned off. We had the MP coming in one door and literally the bailiff going out the other. It was an incredibly difficult time, and the business plan got shoved to one side, and we moved to a war footing. And everybody in the business, on our side of the business, we tried to insulate the football department as best we could. But everybody was on a war footing. You know, some staff went 3 or 4 months without being paid. And it was really humbling that they all decided we were going to stand shoulder to shoulder and see this through one way or another. And the plan then became to buy some breathing space. Originally, it was for Ron to build or get the planning permission on Fossets across the line, but that was, so it's, the amount of time I said it's just short-term cash flow problems, and then it's gone. And to be fair to everybody involved, they've pivoted to stay at Roots Hall, which I think is excellent. And we just tried to buy some time for Justin, whose energy is insane. The way he's galvanised the consortium together and basically taught people who are umming and ahhing about whether or not to get involved in. It's his energy that has, got this pushed across the line. We've just bought the time, but his contribution has been incredible.
And from your point of view, Liam, when was the first time you heard about Justin's consortium, and was there a degree of scepticism to begin with? Why would anybody want to buy Southend? As a football fan, I understand why, but from an outsider's perspective, it looked like a situation which was beyond repair. And yet you've got this guy coming in and saying, "Yeah, I'm not only prepared to do it. I'm prepared to put money in before I get my foot over the door."
Yeah, in the best possible way, he's insane. He's like, Southend was a bin fire, and he went, "Oh, I got a fire extinguisher." He still talks as he still says his original email to the club. There was loads of problems with trying to get Ron was trying to get the new stadium built. And there was previous interest in a deal that looked like taking over the club and building the new stadium at the time. That fell apart, and Ron issued a much more simple deal last summer, which was the club for £1, you take the debt, and then fixed prices for other assets and stuff like that, which is much closer to the mark of where it ended up being, at least. Justin still talks about this like, "Oh, I got £1, so I can do that. That's fine." He's, the guy is sort of weirdly insane. The situation that arose for him to be able to find out about us has been so fortuitous, because we found out about him in court. The same reason that led me to go to court in January was the same reason that Ron, who at this point had run out of money to pay for barristers and was having to self-represent, he was in court in August last year, August 2023, at another winding up hearing. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, Your Honour, don't worry. There's an Australian chap that wants to buy the club, so we'll pay HMRC, but that we need another 6 weeks to sort all of that out." And there was always something with Ron. There was always an excuse for another 6 weeks. And this Australian chap was the thing that everyone leapt on. And by that point, that was in the news, and or rather newspaper reporters had started going to these hearings, and that was the first time we heard of him. We were able to speak to Justin. He's been very, very generous with the trust, with his time and input on some matters, and so we were able to speak to him, I think probably middle of September, early September, something like that. And I asked him why he would want to do this, because, as I say, Southend's at the time, Southend was a total bin fire. Like, why on earth would you rush towards it? And he said, "Oh, well, I like a project." And I thought, yeah, well, you've got one. You've got one. No bigger project than that. We're very, very lucky, really. We're very, very lucky, because the club, Tom will have much more detail on this than I could ever. He will have forgotten more than I'll ever know. But the club was in a bad state, really, really bad state. And Ron had spent essentially 25 years tying the club up in knots. And that becomes really, really, really difficult to disentangle when the sort of time pressures that were against us seemed that way. But Justin and the team that he built, the consortium that he built, with the help of Tom and with the help of some other people, have persevered. As you say, they've put money in when they well before they own the club. They've tried to behave in a way that they feel is right. So they could have tactically paid players' wages but not staff. They've chosen not to do that. They could have chosen not to pay HMRC because it's not their tax obligations, because it's not their business. They've chosen to pay HMRC to make sure that that particular wolf is kept from the door. They've done a lot of things that they didn't need to do. And there's all sorts of reasons why they've done that, but fundamentally they've done it, and they've carried on doing it because I think there's a project there. And a lot of the consortium members, of which Tom is one, are connected with the local area, either fans of the club or grew up in the area, and understand that the club is really, really important to people, and they want to see it succeed, and they want to see it survive, and they want to see it succeed, and they understand that they can play a massive part in doing that. So we were really, really lucky, because the other option was totally unthinkable.
Yeah, I understand that. And from your point of view, Tom, when you were first contacted by Justin, you must have had quite a few tyre kickers and fantasists, because the football industry attracts them. So did he make an initial impression where you thought, we might have somebody who's genuine here, or was there an initial element of scepticism?
No, I mean, when I can remember going down from the top deck at Rooters Hall to the car park to go and greet him, he had his headphones on, white woolly jumper, blue jeans, bounding across. I was like, "G'day, mate." I was like, "Hey, Justin," and we hit it off straight away. He's a fierce, he's so intelligent. He gets across things really quickly. He got the numbers in, no time at all, and understood pretty quickly the potential that could be unlocked with a few changes. I mean, it's since the deal has gone through, Kieran, just one example of that, we've launched season cards. Last year we were at about 3,300. This year, in like 9 days, we were at almost 4,000. And of that 4,000, there's still 700 people who had a season card last year who haven't renewed. So we could be, we're already 20% up on last year. We could be 40% up on season cards, which is, insane. It creates other problems because we're going to have to switch parts of the stadium on which have been switched off, so we can fit everybody in. But what a wonderful problem to have compared to what we've been dealing with for the last sort of two and a bit years. But just on the consortium, I think one of the big advantages is, people will say things about Ron and I, but the advantage of when an individual owner is unable to fund the club, then that causes problems. But when there's 10 of you who can pick up the slack if somebody else, is struggling a little bit, our foundations are much more stable, which gives us a good platform to build on.
I've often said that having an owner who is subsidising a club is a fantastic model until it's not a fantastic model. If circumstances change, if attitudes change, we've seen it at so many other clubs, and it does create a precarious position. You were hinting there, Liam, that perhaps Ron's not on your Christmas card list. From your point of view and the trust, did you used to have a good relationship and it's turned sour, or has this been a long-term issue in terms of not being big buddies?
So my time with the Trust is relatively limited. I only joined the Trust board just over a year ago, and obviously, as Tom has mentioned, it's not just the club that's been on a war footing. The fans have been quite aggressive in that period too. The long-standing relationship between the club and the Trust is that it was better to keep an open dialogue at almost any cost, because at least some flow of information, which even if it was unreliable, even if it turned out to be bogus, could at least be held up and said, oh, well, you said this 3 months ago, or you said this 3 years ago, or whatever. So the Trust has had a lot of accusations of buddying up with the club and with Ron specifically, and sort of being a sort of helpful insider, which isn't necessarily the case because of that chosen route to keep that dialogue open. So it doesn't really speak to my experience, because we've spent most of the last year trying to stamp our feet and trying to talk to anybody so that someone like Justin might see a newspaper article and think he's got a pound coin that can do something. We hope the situation is radically different now. Actually, one of the things that's been really beneficial is while the foundations of the club that Ron has is supposed to provide under his tenure, everything else has really shifted. So to come back to what Tom said a little while ago about Kevin Mayer coming in and solidifying everything, actually what happened with the performances last season, so we were given a 10-point deduction in August last year, and the club nearly finished in the playoffs, which is an extraordinary thing to achieve. I think we would have been fourth or fifth if we hadn't have had that 10-point deduction, and that still included an embargo where we only would have had one substitution at a time. That included all sorts of restrictions that were put on the squad as a result of that. Playing like 16-year-olds, Bo McDonald got a game or two, got off the bench. There were all sorts of restrictions that were put on there, but that galvanised the players. I think the staff were galvanised behind the scenes, and it galvanised the fans as well, because the fans really saw the club fighting for its life on the pitch and off the pitch as well. And I think it has been a really good. It's weirdly been a really, really horrible 12 months that I wouldn't wish on any football fan of any club, apart from maybe Aldershot. But they didn't repair their floodlights a few years ago, but that's a separate thing. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but fundamentally, it's been a really important time for all the people that knew that if the club were to survive, they would still be associated with it. The fans believe in the team. The team see the backroom staff and the club staff working for them. And I think that when we launched our hardship fund in the summer of last year, as Tom says, when staff were going unpaid, because Ron was tactically choosing to keep players paid, to prefer paying them in order to keep them on contracts, because there's all sorts of FIFA rules about not being paid 2 consecutive months or whatever. So we launched a hardship fund to make sure that some of the staff were able to have access to some cash so that they could pay their bills or pay their credit card bills or pay their rent or do whatever they needed to do. So everybody was working hand in glove all the way through. The only person on the outside of it was Ron Martin, and that was the tone in all of my time. It's not always been like that necessarily. Certainly the perception of it hasn't always been like that, but it certainly has been for the past year. And now we're looking for a much more constructive dialogue with the incoming owners.
This is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp Therapy Online. What are your self-care non-negotiables? When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever.
To paraphrase the ruts, if you're in a rut, you've got to get out of it, out of it, out of it, out of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible and suited to your schedule. All you need to do to get started is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a registered therapist. Once you get started, you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge.
With almost 5,000 therapists in the UK already, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a wide variety of expertise. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/price today, that's all in big letters, to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/price.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
Liam just mentioned there, Tom, that you'd points deductions, you'd restrictions last season. How would you describe your relationship with the National League? And could you give us an update, as far as you can say, with regards to what we've seen with the National League demanding a bond, which they've never requested before from another club, from what I can make out?
I think there is actually precedent for it, but certainly not at the level of £1 million. I mean, the relationship with the National League, we've been delinquent one way or another since we joined the league in 21. Late filed accounts, time to pay agreements with HMRC that we breached, football creditors, and so on. And during that period, we've had many arbitrations with the league, which have always been, there's nothing personal there. They've got their job to do enforcing the rules, and I've got my job to do protecting the club. The timing of the bond was an odd one for me, given that, as I said, we've been delinquent since we joined the league. I think at one stage we had 3 years accounts outstanding. You probably know better than me, Kieran. We joined the league carrying £1.93 million worth of HMRC debt. We had, trade creditors approaching £3 million. But since we've joined the league, we've cleared HMRC, so we are straight with them. We have moved from a position of delinquency to compliance with Companies House, and we have paid off 1.5 million, give or take, of historic net debt through the consortium. So, and in that same period, our operating profit position is improving significantly. So it just struck me as an odd time, given all of these improvements, given we're a heartbeat away from the deal going through, the timing of it, and the guns turning on us. It just seemed there was probably a different way to go on that one.
And what was your reaction, Liam, when you heard of this demand from the National League? Because certainly, as an outside observer, and having been involved with the film Gate Money and hearing quite a few other things with regards to sort of the governance of the National League, it does seem a bit free and easy at times, and at others it seems to focus on one or two clubs disproportionately harshly.
I totally agree with Tom. I think the timing of it was really, really unhelpful. I sympathise a lot with the National League's position. They've got lots of clubs to answer to. And my understanding is that the league were under a lot of pressure from member clubs who perceived Southend United's actions as sort of playing with a loaded deck. The idea that we might not be paying HMRC so that we could bung up our own wage bill, which is manifestly untrue. But that was the perception of people, and so there was a lot of action taken to often just quell. I think a lot of it was action taken to just quell that unrest from some of the member clubs. As Tom says, the timing of it was like supremely unhelpful. I really do sympathise with any organisation in the football industry or in the media or in politics that wants to put pressure on rogue owners like Ron Martin. But he had seemingly agreed to sell, and this was the national. It felt like the National League really sticking the knife in and saying you're in a lot of trouble here. The idea that any club in our position would have £1 million in cash ready to pay is laughable. I think the example that Tom references, I think, is Wrexham from probably about 15 years ago, something like that.
As well, Liam. I think they did, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's a few, but as it says, not to that level. So it became a real problem because the club, we didn't know what the consequences of not paying that bond was. We didn't know if that was going to be an enforced relegation to the National League South or whether that was going to be removal from the National League steps of the pyramid entirely, and then we'd be in like the Isthmian Prem. We weren't sure what that was going to be, at which point is the club which is very close to being sold, is that as an attractive proposition to incoming owners if you're having to work your way from step 8 or step 9 or whatever it might be through the pyramid, especially with the same levels of debt. You're not going to have the same levels of income, and we were really worried that the whole thing was going to completely collapse. And there was lots of talk all the way through. There was lots of talk about people about the consortium cutting their losses and deciding that this wasn't going to be from them. You've been really good at publicising the fact that there was a property deal in the town that underpinned this, which meant that the consortium have had to continue to put money in while Southend City Council and the Martin family are working on a housing estate on the edge of town, which would have been the Fossett's Farm new stadium. And the consortium have basically been choosing to fund the club, to pay HMRC, to pay wages, to do all of these other things, as well as a lot of creditors, historic creditors that they'd spoken to, that they were trying to keep the wolves from the door there. And a lot of that had been done, but the consequences of this, of not being compliant with this National League bond, were terrifying, because suddenly you're right back up there at that footballing cliff edge. But with that becomes all of the problems with the value of the business, at which point people just decide. Who could have blamed any one of them for walking away at any point? But certainly to have put £3.5 million into a club that was going to be in like the Isthmian Northern Prem or whatever it would be, is, you know, it would have been all over. And then we're staring down the barrel of like either a fan-led rescue through administration, which would have been perhaps possible, but, you know, unlikely, or Phoenix. And that was the scariest thing in all of this, because like where do you even start? Like where do you even, like, that's how real it was. And the National League, and it felt, as I say, I have sympathy with the organisation, because what they wanted to do was put pressure on Ron, because he's got a seller right there, and they're saying to him, give this up now. But the consequences, and this is a lot of problems with football governance in general, is that the consequences don't fall on rogue owners and bad owners. They fall upon clubs and fans and communities. And so that was terrifying, in all honesty.
And I mean, Liam's just been saying there with regards to property, real estate. Going forwards, Tom, where do we stand in relation to Roots Hall? Is it owned by Justin? You know, it could he, in 5 years' time, decide to do a Shahid Khan and put a swimming pool on top of one of the stands. Where does that? Because we've always maintained that football club and football stadium are so critical, they're so necessary for one another, that once they get separated, things can unravel, and we have seen that at some other clubs.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's not a straightforward answer. I mean, in terms of what do the consortium hold at the moment, they own the training ground, they own the club, and they've got a long lease on Roots Hall with a roadmap to getting the freehold with a long stop date. So there is some certainty around that. And I'll deal with the question about the separation between assets and the club. I mean, historically, the club's assets have been held in separate entities, and I think the difference now is that the custodians of Southend United hold the property assets and the football club. So my own personal view is that the fact that the trading entity is in a separate company against the property assets, everybody will have their different view. For me, given that there isn't a property angle here, I don't see it as such a problem. But one of the things which I'm, as Liam knows, is a big advocate of is a pitch owners agreement. I'd love that us to be able to offer that at some stage. I think it's some time off, and the reason for that, Kieran, is that we want to redevelop Roots Hall. There'll be some money coming from Ron's housing estate. There's a Section 106 agreement in place which will require Ron to help fund the new East Stand and other parts of the stadium. But it's not going to be enough to do what we need to do. So we're probably going to need to get some loans in from entities, and that will require us being able to put a charge on the land in the short term. And I think once we've paid that debt back, then will be the time to do pitch owners, because pitch owners may cause problems in respect to the development plans.
Fair enough. We're transitioning towards the new season, and we sort of, it must be exciting. Do you now have what you consider to be a competitive budget for 24-25, and certainly from what you were saying in terms of season ticket sales? I know when Brighton nearly went out of business in the late 90s, there was that bounce back feeling. And do you think that you can therefore sort of leverage on that over the course of the next season?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge momentum behind us at the moment. I think the budget is it's competitive. There's no pressure on the football department. Of course, we'd like to be in or around playoffs, but we are, as you say, transitioning from a difficult period into the bright new future. So the focus, I think, for us at the moment is to try and create that infrastructure to truly provide that environment for success. And we've got absolute confidence in Kevin and the coaches. We've got some great players there, and I don't think there's many teams that are going to be looking forward to playing us this season. So I think we're going to have a good season, but there's no pressure on anybody. We're all glad to have got through the difficult period, and let's see what we can do.
And what's the view of the fan base, Liam? Is it this is going to be our season? Because you've spent so much time over the past few years looking at legal papers, going to Companies House, sort of phoning up friendly lawyers and so on.
I might actually be able to go watch a football game.
Yeah.
I think promotion is on the cards. I think we've got a really serious shot. If you look at the National League over the last 2 years, Chesterfield were far and away the best team last year, and then it was astonishing, frankly, that Notts County kept pace with Wrexham for as long as they did in the season before that. Coming down, Sutton and Forest Green, I would say they do not pose, historically at least, they do not pose a considerable threat as like a club the size of Wrexham or Notts County or Chesterfield. So I think we've got a really serious shot. As I say, that we would have, without the points deduction last year, and with multiple games where we were only able to name one sub on the bench, we still would have finished 4th or 5th without the points deduction. So we've been able to, what the club has been able to do in terms of strengthening the squad through various embargoes and more players in this summer. I'm sure I'd like to find out just now if Tom's got any more players that are due to come in, but I might not. So there's a possibility. The National League have introduced rules about we're going to have 7 substitutes this year. I thought seven names on the bench, excuse me, and there's going to be 5 substitutes within that. So the possibility of the quality that we've got, we can protect them a little bit more, and the quality that we've got to come off the bench can affect the game a little bit more. So we're going to be in a much stronger position than we were last year, and I am really, really, really looking forward to it. And I think we should be hoping to finish in the top 3. I would like to see us finish in the top 3 because I think we can do it.
That's spoken like a true football fan. I think that's fantastic to hear. I mean, you mentioned a couple of other clubs there. Sort of during your travails over the past few years, have you been in contact with other fan groups to see how they've dealt with owner-related issues and in terms of trying to sort of pick up tips and strategies on how to deal with somebody who's not necessarily singing from the same hymn sheet as you are?
Yeah, so every club's situation is ever so slightly different, but we've had an enormous amount of support, and I will try and name some, but there might be listeners of certain clubs who I don't recall, but we've spoken to like trust members or supporter organisation members at Wrexham. We've had a lot of financial help from York last summer with our hardship fund. We've spoken to Scarborough. We've spoken to Blackpool. We had a fun conversation earlier on in the year because we had a chat with the Blackpool Supporters Trust who were telling us about how to move from a war footing into a peacetime footing, and then we went straight back on the front foot again. We've spoken to Tranmere, we've spoken to Wickham, we've spoken to Swansea, and the FSA have provided an enormous amount of help as well. A lot of it has been really skirting around the edges of what's available for us to do because we've had to try and prepare for a situation that none of us wanted. A lot of it has been about bringing people to the table that can materially affect what's going to happen with the club. So the Trust's approach, a lot of it has been just sort of getting Southend United in the media as much as possible to try and publicise things, to try and attract attention, not just necessarily in the context of the incoming football regulator, but also just trying to get the name out there so that people feel that they can come and help the club in some way, as well as speaking to local politicians and local politicians on the national scale as well. We had Anna Firth, who was really, really supportive. She didn't win re-election, but she was really, really supportive during her time. both representing the club in court through letters to the court, and also representing the fan base to the ownership at the club as well. So we've had a lot of support from a lot of areas, and it's been really, really heartwarming, actually, because the people that you speak to, all they want is to see the clubs around them and the football ecosystem be a healthy place, and they want to see clubs that have a long history and a great history survive and thrive, and they want to see a competitive football pyramid. And I think that's what we all want to see. I would be honoured one day if someone picks up the phone to me and says, what happened with you guys and Ron Martin, because I'd love to be able to share that story as I have done today. It's been really, really heartwarming. The support from the football community has been one of the biggest points in all of this, and the FSA, especially in terms of coordinating stuff like that, we were talking about at one point. We were looking at trying to be organised for a Phoenix club, and they've been tremendously supportive in putting us in touch with the right people, so that if we needed to execute that, then we could. So it's been really heartwarming, and I'm delighted to be able to say we're probably not going to need much of anyone's help. That was the nicest story of all.
That's fantastic. I mean, Liam's just mentioned the independent regulator there, Tom. The position of the National League, it appears to be opposed to the regulator, and it also seems perfectly happy with the abolition of the replays in the FA Cup. Were you as a club consulted on that, and do you as a club ever took a view with regards to the regulator and replays?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is no. We weren't consulted on the FA Cup replays, but we had a presentation from Andy Ambler at the FA at the National League Conference, and he basically said this is a UEFA thing. We need to free up space for the expanded European competitions. So even if the National League had consulted you, it wouldn't have made any odds, because that's what was happening. So in terms of the outcome may have changed, but I think we should have been consulted on that. I think we should have been consulted on the Premier League under-21s competition, which was what it was presented as a fait accompli. This is what's happening, guys. And, there's a lot of clubs that haven't got the squad depth to put in another 4 or 6 games. We were concerned about our pitch during that sort of November to February period, which is already a difficult period. We didn't want to stress the pitch. And of course, there was issues about our players getting injured. So, yeah, it was the consultation hasn't been the best along the way. In terms of the football regulator, I mean, I think it's different. I think something needs to happen, and I mean, we've spoken before, Kieran, about those cliff edges, all the way from the top of the Premier League. Cliff edge when you're not in the Champions League position, another cliff edge when you fall into the Championship, then champion to League 1 and 2. From 1 to 2 isn't so bad, but as soon as you fall out of the EFL, your central distributions go from about 1.5 million to about 120,000. I mean, it's a huge cliff edge, and something I'm quite passionate about as well is what happens to the academy, because not only do you lose central distributions of about 1.5 million, you lose academy funding of 500,000. Okay, it's staggered over 2 years, but after 2 years, we've had to disband our academy because we've not been able to, we can't justify running it. We need to put all of our resource into exiting this league. So I think there's things like that which I think the regulator should look at, just to make it less painful to fall out of the EFL system. And also, there's a lot of good people who lost their jobs at our club because the academy had to be disbanded. And it's, I just think they should certainly look at trying to do something to ease that pain.
Welcome Welcome to another round of Drawing Board or Miro Board. Today we discuss technical diagramming with systems architect Maya. Let's go. First question. You've spent 10 hours slogging over a sequence diagram that should have taken 5. Drawing board or Miro board?
Drawing board. And if I'm being honest, Miro would probably cut that time down by half. You know, with its AI tools and ready-to-go templates.
Next, your diagrams become so bulky, it's more complex than the solar system. But all it takes is a few clicks and...
It's Miro. I've used those technical shape packs way too many times.
Now, the final question. Everyone's brought in, but you have to make all these tasks all the way over in Jira. But wait, it's done. Is it...
Miro, easy with its two-way Jira sync. Easy to plot dependencies. Everyone always knows what's up.
And she's done it.
For a limited time, visit Miro.com/diagram now and get a free business plan trial to unlock even more features like advanced shapes, dependency mapping, and two-way Jira syncing. Get started today at Miro.com/diagram now.
What's the view of the trust or your own, Liam? Is it a... Do you think that having a regulator could have stopped what had happened to Southend? Because I'm not convinced myself.
Well, that's a good question because, you know, Ron didn't start down this path in 1998 when he took over the club immediately. Well, I mean, he sort of did because that was when he sold the stadium to himself for £4 million. So I think that, you know, people don't necessarily become a bad owner overnight. Ron, I think, would Ron Martin have been stopped by an independent regulator? Not a good independent regulator, not a sufficient independent regulator wouldn't have stopped people like Ron Martin. I think it needs to be really robust. I personally am in full support of it. The question is what we're trying to do. I met Stephanie Peacock just very briefly at the FSA conference a couple of weeks ago, who's the new sports minister. And we're trying to position Southend United as a test case for the regulator, because, as you say, any regulator that doesn't ward off or prohibit the actions of someone like Ron Martin, either beforehand or in situ, it is just simply not sufficient, because you'll just see more clubs go to the wall where people lie in order to get their way in, rather than and can't be policed once they're there. One of the most attractive parts of the regulator when it was proposed was the idea of a licensing system, so that clubs would have to there was so much focus on fit and proper directors tests in the first place, and those are important, but the licensing system was really interesting because I think that was either on an annual or maybe on a 3-year basis. Clubs needed to provide evidence of what their business plan was going to be in either to maintain or fund losses, or to reduce losses to a point, you know, operational losses, reduce those to a point where it was in a much more sustainable fashion for the business. And if they couldn't do that, then they wouldn't be issued with a license to play. And so that idea of like coaxing owners into thinking about how to run a football club rather than just holding on, trying to make some money out of the bricks and mortar assets, and fucking it all up along the way, as has happened with us, then it would be, you know, it's a much more effective way of policing some of those rogue owners. I don't know what the government's plans are, because, you know, since we've had a change of government, we're hoping that the Labour Party will punch those up a little bit and make them a little bit tougher, a little bit more robust, before they have a chance. They've introduced it in the King's Speech, which means that the clock is ticking. But yeah, we're absolutely in favour of it, because the ecosystem within football is unsustainable, and it's not just the cliff edges. It's the way that you climb up all of those. There's very little being done in terms of like sustainable partnerships. The communities that a lot of the clubs are born from is being forgotten in favour of like overseas commercial deals and stuff like that. There's all sorts of things about the TV rights that cause fans to be stuck with like odd train tickets and, you know, really difficult stuff like that, and all of that just the industry needs to just have a little bit of a think about who the most important person is in this, because it's not balanced at the moment. The fans should not be put on a pedestal. I'm not advocating that everything should revolve around match-going fans, but there is absolutely an unbalance there at the moment between what fans are being asked to do financially, and what they're getting out of the situation. And so, yeah, we need to see something. It's a real shame that the FA don't feel that they have enough teeth to have done this, because they're already essentially in a sort of semi-autonomous position to regulate quite a lot of this sort of stuff. But they've shown themselves to be quite weak on things like that, and have bent over backwards. And we've seen that with things like FA Cup replays and stuff, as far as the Premier League and other organisations are concerned. So, yeah, really, really supportive of it, and just hope that in terms of its scope, it's broad enough, and then in terms of its sort of punitive actions that it can take to really, it needs to be more than a rap on the knuckles. It needs to be more than a £5,000 fine. It needs to be serious consequences, and they need to be directed at owners, not at the clubs. That is the real problem here. Southend United, and there's so many examples of staff that have stayed on, as Tom said, when they've not been paid, or people that have come in and worked when the situation around them, those players last year, when they had one player on the substitute bench, it's a really bad look for them for health and safety. Like, it's fundamentally dangerous to not be able to rotate your squad at the pace that the game is played these days. So people give and give and give to institutions, to clubs, and the fans see that, they form that attachment. It is so galvanising. And then what happens is the National League, in the example with Southend, feel that they can kick us out of the league if we don't pay £1 million. The crosshairs of punishment need to be retargeted. They need to be focused on owners who are only in it for themselves.
Fair enough. Right. One just final question, guys. I know I've used an awful lot of your time this morning. We've just seen DAZN sign a 7-year deal for the 5th tier of English football. And for me, that's a huge vote of confidence in our national sport. Southend are part of that. You're in that 5th tier now. Realistically, where do you expect to be in 5 years' time?
Well, where we'd like to be in 5 years, Kieran, is we'd like to be in moving towards a break-even position with a newly developed East Stand, with conferencing and banqueting and office space, a gym, sports bar, and so on. And that will put us in a much, a sustainable, stable position. I mean, stability is one of our key threats. And I can see you smiling because you want me to say in EFL 1 or something. We'd love to be back in the league. It's where Southend belongs, and we think we've got a great team who can give us the best chance of achieving that. But as I keep saying, there's no pressure on the guys, and the better facilities we can build. So we moved from a 26-day-a-year business to a 365-day-a-year business will provide us with the financial resource to help propel us out of the league. So, that's what we'd like to achieve. Break-even position, which will be difficult, by the way, but that's what we'd like to achieve. And league status would be wonderful.
I'll say League One. Do you want me to say League One? I'm happy with that. I think like that answer is what I would hope that the chief exec of the club I support would say. To be honest, I don't want Tom to be romantic. I want him to say, yeah, making sure that the club makes enough money to not be dead is the answer I want to hear out of his mouth. So maybe that's part of it. But if you look at the situation at the bottom end of League Two, clubs circle the drain. Because there's only 2 relegation spots, clubs circle the drain for years without going down. And so the overall quality at the bottom end of League Two is quite low. You could quite easily take probably 7 or 8 teams at the top end of the National League and swap them out with the 7 or 8 teams at the bottom of League Two, and you'd improve League Two vastly just because of the amount of clubs that could just get caught down there for years. We could easily end up in League One within 5 years. We have a fantastic squad that work hard. We have a fantastic we have a fantastic management team that understand how the game's played. We dominate games. We play really well with the ball. We scored a lot of goals last year. We don't concede barely any goals, barely any chances. That's what you need in order to climb the table. And then getting into League Two, we've talked about momentum already. The momentum is there to carry us all the way through. We've got a really good recruitment team. We've got a really good, all of the people that I know that work for the club behind the scenes several of them have been talked out of taking jobs at other clubs as part of during the process of this takeover going through. They've had offers on the table from other clubs where they would be paid on time, and at clubs in much higher divisions, and they've been talked out of not doing it. We've got some serious people at this club who all wanted to make a success of Southend United, but there was one bloke at the top that was prohibiting that.
I think
and so
I was going to say, Lee, I think that point's really important. You know, the people at the club have been amazing, and the culture, you know, and the bonds that have been forged through adversity are strong. And we are in a good place. We just need to maintain that culture going forward in the positive new world.
Yeah, so Tom agrees with me then. We'll be in League One in 5 years. There you go.
We'll clip that bit for the video show. Guys, thank you so much. And I like the idea of hospitality and conferencing, because you could even host a live football finance podcast, which has done the tour of quite a few grounds over the past couple of seasons.
You'd be very welcome.
Interested.
You'd be very welcome.
Well, thanks again, guys, and have a fantastic season. Who's your first opponents?
We have York, and we're on the 10th. We're looking forward to welcoming Matt Ugler and Alistair, the chief exec. They're good people. They were there for us in our hour of need, and it should be a real celebration.
Well, a big thanks to Liam and Tom for that. I gave up a lot of their time. They were pretty candid. They said as much as they could. And all I can say is, on behalf of myself, Kevin and producer Guy, have a great season, guys, and get back to enjoying football.
The price of football. The price of football.